eyes going, have that be the beginning of your next book, which he did say. It's the only time I will admit that he was ever right. Anyway, we all know that this is the way Bigfoot sightings look today. Who in their right mind would argue this phenomenon only happens in the Northwest? But historically, that was the deal. But I got involved in BFRO and learned about this particular location in right down here in Oklahoma, bottom corner of Oklahoma against Arkansas, lower southeast corner. And it's a very woodsy place. There was a family that was being literally terrorized by these creatures that were coming around, pulling the siding off their windows, stealing their food out of their outdoor freezer, and just making a pest of themselves. So much so that they really felt endangered for their safety. And so one of these guys who lived there, one of the Humphreys guys, Michael, gets out there and takes a shot at one, and he feels like he hit it, and there was blood going across the ground, and so he mentioned this to BFRO, and they said, don't touch a thing, we're going to be out there, we're going to send our crack team of experts. But before they could get there, the rain washed it away. There was this terrific thunderstorm, all evidence gone. So don't ever have the crack team of experts tell the people, go pick it up now. Do not wait. Very bad piece of advice, but there's something interesting about that we'll get to later if we have time. Anyway, so this got me going on the camera thing. This was one of my early camera experiments. This is the battery that powered the camera. It's basically a baby monitor. Who are we kidding? But I was able to record it, and then there's my offering that I was trying to get in. So obviously in my own very rudimentary fashion, I'm trying to get Bigfoot to take something away from in front of the camera. Click, got your picture, thank you very much. Oh boy, am I smart, right? So then once I started doing these camera experiments, I got involved with BFRO again because I was looking for a place where the shit was going on. And I did understand that Mount Rainier is about as good a place as you can find anywhere. More stuff goes on there than anywhere. So I was really watching the sighting reports, and I found this family near Mount Rainier, and they had stuff going on, and I was even able to say, hey, do you have an outdoor freezer? And they go, yeah. Well, what about it? And I said, have you lost anything from the outdoor freezer? And they go, yeah. And I go, that's Bigfoot. And they're like, how did you know? And I go, well, so what happened in Oklahoma is they're losing stuff from the outdoor freezer. And I said, we blame the kids. And I'm like, what did you lose? And they go, well, that was the weird thing, is the creamsicles weren't touched, and the side of a pig disappeared. And I'm like, really? You think your teenager's going to take the side of a pig? Well, all we knew was we were going to have a pig roast. We couldn't have a pig roast because the pig disappeared. Anyway, so it all started happening to Hoyts. And I said, can I deploy some cameras? And they said, sure, they'll help you. Well, this is really cool. This is the freezer. And so we put cameras on the freezer. We actually hid it in this beehive, and it didn't work. But I also camped out there. And they said, oh, they're around, you camp out. So I sat there in my sleeping bag with a camcorder in my sleeping bag. And as soon as anything happened, I was going to turn on that camcorder, and I heard something say, they'll be circling around, you can't guarantee you. In fact, we can't believe you're even stupid enough to sleep out there. We would never do that. I said, it's okay, I think we'll be all right. So I'm lying in my sleeping bag, I hear the crashing around, going around me, I pull out the camcorder, I turn it on, everything stops, and then I turn it off, and that was it. That was the end. Nothing ever happened for me again at that site. Well, anyway, I wasn't so sure. We doubled down on the cameras. We eventually went from trail cams to video sets, and then motion detector, and then the computers really came on. We got some Intel engineers to help us set up the cameras and record, and motion detector, and boy, we were styling. And we never got anything for 2 years. Well, finally, Ray Crow, and by the way, this is the kind of image that we were getting back then. You do a lot better now. Again, this was 2000, this was maybe 2001. I might even say on here, no it doesn't. Wait a minute, say it on that last one. Okay, there, 2001. So, about this time, Ray Crow, rest his soul, local club organizer, sent me the name of a guy who had some weird things to report. His name was Steve Fredericks, and he said, I think I got contact with these things. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to ridicule. I listened to him, and then I thought, you know, Steve, we've got these cameras, we've had them out for 2 years, we ain't getting nothing. Just consider the possibility that they do understand about cameras. But if you think you have a means of communication, let's give it a try. Maybe the one thing that they're tired of is we're trying to use tricks and traps. The one thing I've never done is ask permission. So Steve, I want you to get busy. I want you to use whatever juju you got to submit a request. Would you please step in front of the camera? And Steve Fredericks is like, I don't know if we're going to like that, Tom, but okay. I said, just try it, Steve. And so he said, all right, I'll call you back when I feel like it's happened. And so he called me back probably 2 weeks later. It was a Thursday night, and he said, okay, I did it. And they kind of listened, but it didn't seem like they were too happy about the idea. I said, all right, you did it, Steve. Thank you very much. The next, it was 48 hours later. It was a Thursday night. He called me. Friday, Saturday night, Alan and April called me up and said, Tom, we got a picture. We got a picture. And I'm like, oh, wow. I'll be right up. Jumped in my car, drove up to Chehalis, Washington, and this is what we got. I listened to him laugh, okay? Feel free. Yes, it sucks. But it was the best thing we had up until that point. Now, what you maybe see there is a Head and Shoulders. Could it be somebody who lives there? Yes, they say it wasn't. The timing was such, you know, so we're talking about 9:53 on December 30th. So one night before New Year's Eve. And so they gave me this and they said, that's decent. I mean, to me it looks like somebody's doing a little shadow puppet thing. But that's the best we got. Well, at that point I realized this camera thing is a waste of time. Maybe Steve Fredericks has a pipeline going on here. So I called back Steve. I didn't tell him we got this. I just said, Steve, I want you to try the experiment again. This time I want you to tell him, please give us a bone. And Steve said, oh shit, Tom, they're not going to like that one, did they? And I'm like, Steve, just tell them we want a bone. So Steve's like, okay, I'll call you back when I think I've tendered the message. Steve calls me back a week or two later, and this time it was on a Friday night. He calls me back and said, I did what you said. They did not seem like they were listening. I said you wanted a bone. Less than 48 hours later, day and a half later, Alan and April called me up and said, Tom, we just found a bone at the base of the camera tree. I did not tell Alan and April what we were doing. I did not tell Steve Fredericks what Alan and April were getting. So, you know, this is at least a single blind, if not a double blind experiment, you know. This is the way they work in psychology. You're not supposed to let the other guy know because you could have this self-fulfilling, this Rosenthal effect going on. So I did not tell Alan and April that we were doing the juju. I did not tell Steve Fredericks we were getting results, but we did get a bone, and I drove on up there, and this is the bone. And as you can see, it's kind of curved. It's kind of like saucer shaped or bowl shaped. It's not as steep as that, but it's kind of that shape. And there it is turned over. You can see it's very thick. You can see it's got a whole bunch of little holes in it, so it's very light. And but it's so big and curved that you just kind of look like the top of a head. I took it to a wildlife expert, Leroy Fish, the same guy who walked across the spooky desk, and I said, what is this? And he said, it's a bird bone of some kind. And I'm like, well, why do you explain this big fish shape? I mean, it's almost as big as this bowl. And he said, I do not know. Well, there were these neighbors near where I lived on Tranquility Lane who were raising emus, and for some reason I just had an instinct and I wheeled on in there and I showed the guy the bone and I said, do you have any book of emu parts? And he said, I sure do. And he pulled out this emu textbook and there's the whole skeleton. That is the breastbone of an emu. Now, how the hell did it get to Alan and April's tree? And I showed it to Alan and April. I said, it's a breastbone of an emu. Do you know of anybody? He says, my dad raises emus. Where does your dad live? 5 miles away. How did the bone get from your dad? What does he do with the birds when they die? He throws them in a pit out back. So, okay, there's a supply. 5 miles away. How did it get to Alan and April's? No one will say. I went back to Steve Fredericks. I finally said, Steve, the program is over. They want their life back. We decided to stop doing the cameras, but could you explain to me, again, I showed him the bone, and he said, you know, I said bone, but I didn't say which kind. And so it's not like, ooh, could we be dealing with something? It's like, okay, white boy, you want a bone, here's a bone. It's not one of us, and no way we're going to give you one of our own kindred spirits, but you want a bone, here's a bone. In other words, it's just barely possible that they understood the difference between what I was asking for and what they were or were not willing to give. Very thought-provoking. Where's my proof? Ain't got none. It's all speculation. Now let's fast forward to 2012. It was Toby, our buddy down in Eugene, who was told about a track find on what's the name of the lake again, Cliff? Cottage Grove Reservoir, thank you. And there's a whole shit ton of tracks going out across the mud flat at their reservoir. It's drawn down in the wintertime for flood purposes. We ran down there. Cliff went down and must have pulled 60 tracks himself. 72. And this was the original one. It was found by a guy walking his dog, and then he brought it to Toby's attention because Toby was his neighbor. We went to find the one track, and we found this whole string. And they went way out into the lake, and then did a U-turn, and then came back out that way. So this is our little attempt. Cliff had already been there. That's probably debris from Cliff's work. And we cast the ones that Cliff didn't have enough plastic to cast. So all in all, we probably had 120 of these casts, and we weren't all that good. For a while, we were pretty proud of them. Cliff later decided, they have too much similarity. Meldrum says the leverage thing is questionable. At this point, it's kind of a toss-up of, 50-50, are they valid, are they not? I'm not going to throw them away. I frankly like them, but, Cliff and I disagree on that. It's all in good-natured scientific debate. And then in 2018, Cheshire, Oregon, not very far from, that might be another reservoir, but maybe it's over there. Anyway, another track find, 2018. Notice the similarity of date, February 16th, February 14th. What's going on here? Here, February 16th, a track find, here it is. Where is she? Oh, is it Shelly? Sandy, sorry. Sandy's friend, this young lady right here, got a call from her friend or hers who said, you're not going to believe what I found. These footprints on this mattress that somebody had thrown aside. It's really more of a futon, I suppose. And what was your friend's name? Kristen. So Kristen takes a picture. That's Kristen's Zippo right there. And there's the footprint, so there's a bit of scale. The thing walked across the mattress. By the way, do you know the difference between a hippo and a Zippo? One is really heavy and the other one's just a little lighter. Anyway, so Kristen sends her info on this, and then Cliff gets the call, and he wisely doesn't have to try to go down there himself and find him. He sends Chris Miniar. Chris Miniar drives all over the county looking, trying to find these directions, make sense of them. He does not find the tracks, and then he calls back Cliff and says, you want to give me those directions again? And then Cliff gives him the directions again, and he looks and he finds them, and it was 1.25 miles from his house. And on the same road, right down the way. Here's Cliff and Melissa and I cruising on down to the scene. Chris Miniar has already done the collecting. We take pictures of the mattress. I think Chris Miniar took that picture. 13-inch tracks. Chris Miniar cut the tracks off of the mattress, and there they are, faithfully preserved in Cliff's museum across the parking lot. And so we playfully call them the Shroud of Cheshire, Shroud of Turin, whatever. It's a religious thing. All right, weird. Last one, Yakult, Washington, 1979. Larry Lund, one of Ray Crow's proteges, gets a report of a Little League baseball game that's going on in Yakult, Washington, which is near Battleground, just up the freeway, a little bit into the mountains. 2 separate sightings on the same day of a Sasquatch walking across the baseball field. First from right field to left field, and then it went from, first it went from left field to right field, then right field to left field. In the middle of the game, the first time it happened, all the parents sitting there thought, okay, what prankster has got the costume? Good way to get shot, idiot! And then it comes across again in another one of these games. They're having a tournament. And one of these said it seemed like he was interested in the game. Maybe it was a juvenile, like, I can hit better than that. Well, this led me to the story of Shady Neighbors. It was just a really cool idea that the Sasquatch is like somehow interacting with the baseball game. That was perfect. That just gave me the plot element I needed. Last summer, Cliff calls me up, sends me this picture. This is our guy Cliff in the back, and he says, Tom, there's a baseball in my yard. He lives up the Sandy River, miles from the nearest baseball field. And here this baseball shows up in his yard one day. What's going on? This is where I'm getting to. Is it possible that we are being watched? That they understand the research community, they know Cliff, they know me, they know what's going on. And they're throwing us literally a bone sometimes, and standing back and going, let's see, what's going on with this? But to me, there are commonalities to these 3 events, which suggests that we are being worked. All right? Well, first of all, there are many kinds of communication. When you buy somebody dinner, that's communicating, even if no words are spoken. If you're putting food out for their benefit, that's communication. But really, I think, oh, and by the way, try not to call it feeding, it's gifting. That's a little less condescending, So us Bigfooters who do this kind of stuff, we like to call it gifting. Seems a little bit more collegial. But what we're really looking for is language. We want to know, do Sasquatches have language? Well, Tobit Inlet, what's his name, Cliff?
Osman.
Yeah, he said he wasn't in this language. He was taken temporarily hostage. Albert Osman said they were chattering. But what we're finding now is indications that there is this, and maybe the bottom 2, that you can telepath with these things. And so I take this to my guys like Henry Franzoni, and he says, well, first of all, there are pictures. Here is a picture from 1933. People took a picture in Australia, and only when they got the picture back from the developer did they see that. That's great. Photobombed by a Yowie. To the best of my knowledge, that is a real picture. But in this world of Photoshop, any photograph is being called into question. I get that. It's not proof. It may not even be very good evidence, but it's amusing. But when it comes to things like the Cheshire tracks, the ones Chris Miniar found, it has been suggested to me by some people with spiritual inclination that there is a combination of these power spots, like the location, and something having to do with the people like ourselves who are interacting, maybe unintentionally, with these creatures, especially if they have some sort of spirit aspect to them. So now, this past summer, Cottage Grove right near the reservoir where we found those tracks, Toby says, oh man, we got this guy Daryl who has the shit going on, you gotta come down and see what's going on. And so we went down to his place and we sat in his barn all night, we walked around and we did all things and not much happened. And they're of course filming everything and I'm going, oh you guys, you might want to ixnay on the ilm-fay. But anyway, so then I decided, here's one thing that's worked in the past. Let's just see if they want to play the game. I took 4 pieces of cedar, made a little tic-tac-toe board, and I put a little stone there, put a little pile of stones there, put some other things there. They said things have been moved around here in the past, and then we went off to the little conference that Toby was having at the tavern downtown. When we came back, so there was my initial move. When we came back, then we had this. Swear to God. And this was in the middle of the day. And so I'm like, really? All right, come on, Daryl. Who's playing with us here? And he said, there's no one home. Can't prove it, but I'm here to tell you there was no one around. So there we go with the initial response. So I said, okay, let's answer it. By the way, that's me taking the picture. That's not Sasquatch. And so, yeah. We should be so lucky. Wasn't a lot worse than April and Alan's picture, by the way. So we come back and there, and so then I put one there. And I don't know what that stick in the middle is doing. And then we came back later in the day, and my stone was moved up to there. And then another stone. It's like, well, you can't move my pieces. That's not how the game is played. But in other words, they kept being moved around. And then we came back the next morning, and then the feather was there. And that really put a chill in everyone. So anyway, what this suggests, I think, if you're camping out and if you want to try things that don't require expensive electronics and so on, you can potentially play games like this. Now, I did say to Toby and to Daryl, so wait a minute, you guys are telling me that Sasquatches have nothing better to do than to come around and put stones? These guys must be horribly busy answering everybody's little things. And, you know, they said, no, it does it with energy. It's not necessarily there at all, but it's able to manipulate energy fields. Okay, if you guys say so. But anyway, so here's the paranormal tic-tac-toe game. And this move, followed by that move, followed by, I think it was this one, and then this one, and then move, and then the feather was last. Anyway, that was the back and forth that was played. It invites further experimentation, doesn't cost you anything. If you live in a rural location, try these kinds of games. You know, putting out food all the time, I think is just going to invite a bunch of varmints. Maybe every once in a while it's Bigfoot, but you know, how are you going to separate that from raccoons and everything else? So when you remove the food and just play games, I think it's a valid type of experimentation. It will never rise to the level of proof, especially when it comes to other people. You know, I could go on, but you get the idea. I'm gathering intel here. I wish I was doing science, but we are in a pre-science condition until we figure out what experiment can be done. We're just gathering intelligence, which is what spies do. We look for patterns. We can't study rogue entities. Nothing is verifiable. I get that, but also never underestimate the intelligence of your adversary, and I do think a good deal of this goes on. Especially when I was doing the cameras. We were frequently getting leads put over the camera lens, getting cameras torn down. When I was working for the Forest Service, the camera would be torn down off the tree and left face down in the ground, but not stolen and not damaged. But something seemed to be saying, don't like this camera. Didn't destroy it, didn't take it. Anyway, here's Henry Franzoni. And he's the one who I went to and with this stuff, and he said, duh, Tom. I'm like, Henry, why didn't you tell me this stuff sooner? And he said, well, if I did, you would not have believed me. There's kind of a rule in the Bigfoot game, and that is you got to figure it out. You got to figure it out for yourself, because if somebody else tells you, some Native American fellow who decides to share out with you, you're just going to go, no way, and go back to doing it another way. Well, I don't disdain or disparage anybody who's still using cameras, who's putting out pieces of raw beef. I say, hey, you do your way, I'll do mine. We share notes at the end of the day. So I'm still cheering for anybody who's doing cameras, but I will say, yeah, I gave up on it a long time ago. If you can find this book, buy it. This is Henry's book. There's his name right there. And he gets very metaphysical about his ideas about what the phenomenon, how the phenomenon manifests. Because his book is very hard to find, I will tell you some of the bullet points. He says they emanate from underground. They go underground. They do use doorways, but they don't need them. They can move south through solid matter. They are telepathic with all organisms. They can take control of you and knock you out cold. So if you do things to threaten them by way of guns, it's not going to work, and I wouldn't recommend it. And then he says, again, this is Henry, that they can move between vibration rates, or Henry calls them frame rates, kind of like the 16mm films that you watch when you're in school as a kid. Well, if you speeded it up and then things go really fast, we're operating at a very fast frame rate, they operate at a slower frame rate, so they can be in the same room with you and you cannot see them. But there are some, physics ideas that could be used to support that. But of course, when you say they can go invisible like that, most people roll their eyes. And I don't blame them. And of course, they can change forms. A lot of people, oh, I saw this stump, and then I looked back and the stump was gone. They're able to either stay still and look like a stump, or they're able to become a stump somehow. But the Indian perspective, the Native Americans say they move into and out of the trees. How that works, I do not know. There's some physics homework left to do on that. But basically, these are some things that, again, Henry would support about the Sasquatch. They are very skilled in their application of logical principles. They are ultra efficient in their use of resources. That is, they don't leave any environmental impacts. They strictly control their population. They are very good at deception, and they also have wonderful senses of humor. And to me, that's been borne out in various things. The Cheshire tracks seem to me very deliberate. There's no reason that creature needed to track across that futon. And especially with the mud, it's almost like they used the mud puddle as an ink pad and then went like that. Oh, the white people are going to love this. And same thing, the Skookum cast. When I finally said, you guys, try to do something to accommodate him, and then boom, this cast just falls out of the sky within 12 hours. It's as if they're saying, finally, someone has an idea that we agree with. But I get many, many indications of sense of humor, but again, they're all very sort of vague in some way. One Navajo elder told me once something very impractical to do, but he said, this is how you tell they're there. When you're going down the trail one way, count the trees. And when you're coming back the other way, count the trees again. You will get a different number. And I'm like, count the trees in the forest? Really? I mean, it's easier said than done. But his point was that they can disguise themselves as trees. One thing that a lot of people who are still trying the cameras do is they film behind them. Or what often happens too is one of the reasons it's thought that they are averse to cameras is because they understand that your eye cannot necessarily see them owing to their vibration rate, but the camera will pick them up. And that's why they are averse to those things. But so people, there are many instances of somebody filming around more or less randomly, filming the dogs just running through the woods, and when they go home and look at the picture, they see something in the background. There was one of those at Mary S. Young State Park in West Lynn, so, it kind of stuff happens. Anyway, then there's this business about the giant skeletons. If you look for a book on that, they have a few of Powell's. It's crazy. The idea that, I left it in the car, I think, let's see, this right here. These giant skeletons have been found all over the United States, 8, 10 feet tall. They turn over the Smithsonian, they go away. What the? So, it seems to me that there might even be physical evidence of the Sasquatch that is in possession of certain institutions. And I'm told that there is one of these giant skeletons on display in a museum in Quito, Ecuador, if you're ever traveling down there. And then there are these megalithic structures, and then there's the mounds, the henges, and so forth, and these places where it seems to suggest that really strong beings built these really big things And again, according to the Native Americans, they go, no, we did not build those, even though the mounds are considered Native American relics, but the Native Americans themselves say, no, we did not build those. The Thom ones built those that predated our arrival here. So there are some interesting things that way. One of the more interesting places is Shasta. How are we doing for time, by the way? Anybody?
8:37 right now. Got about 5-10 minutes.
Okay, so it's about 8.
It's 8:37.
Okay, good. All right, so Alyssa lives down there in Shasta. She has a book called Spots of the Fawn, and she is into these pretty new age ideas, as shown by these books, which she showed me. And she says that, oh no, this business of it happening in certain place. She calls that spots of the fawn, these energy places around the landscape. Very important to pay attention to. If you're lucky enough to find one of these things, that's where the shit goes on. She says these spirit beings, of which they are manifest, they need us as much as we need them. And yes, if you find these magic spots, you're in a good place to make something happen, but it's as much a part of your being there as the spot. It is a interaction of those two things. And Alyssa says these are places with high electromagnetic frequencies, high EMF readings, waters and springs, like the place behind, your place. There are sacred sites that the Indians often recognize. That's usually where you find the mounds if they manifest. And these are also places where historically they put cathedrals. Where these power spots, another one is thought to be East Ranch up there in Trout Lake, Washington. But consciousness is also a very important part of it. Here's one researcher who was mainly into UFOs, but he said crop circles, UFOs, Sasquatch sightings, and he said they all happen in these certain orientations which suggest that certain parts of the landscape are more powerful than others. And I believe he's saying it's 33 or 34 degrees latitude. So think about that one. Anyway, the idea that you can prove it to your friends. Freddie Silva, who's big into popsicles, says spirituality is a big part of what's going on here. Spirituality is not a circus act. It's not going to happen for your friends. Henry Franzoni says, I can't tell you what Bigfoot is, you have to figure it out for yourself. If I told you, you wouldn't believe me. I used that one already. There are things in this world you're not supposed to know. Jesus said spirituality is personal. And Alyssa says the only proof you're ever going to get is personal experience. So what they're saying is you can have something happen for your benefit, but don't expect something that you're going to take and show your friends. It doesn't work that way. Anyway, the alchemists, of which Isaac Newton was one, understood that part of science, if you combine science and spirituality, you can make crazy things happen. Consciousness can make things happen. And this is where I'm getting to. The brain responds to directions. Consciousness is out here, and your brain and your memories are in here. Your memories also exist out here, but they're backed up in here. But the thing that's driving your body actually exists out here, according to the people who espouse these ideas, at least. Thoughts and perceptions direct cell function. And these thoughts and perceptions are basically something that's happening in the realm of consciousness. Memory exists outside the body, but it's backed up in the brain, and this consciousness can make things happen, but it ain't going to perform for your friends. These are philosophers who would advocate for this and who have written books on it, so if you want to take a picture of that one, good luck reading all those guys. But this one and this one, I think I've gotten the most from them. And so what that all boils down to, so now how do we make this happen? I want to go camping, I want to make it happen. How do we put all this together? Yeah, first of all, think about it. In other words, think wild thoughts. In other words, think about the Saskies out there that are inhabiting the landscape and go, I'm chill, I'm good with it, I don't have any cameras, I'm groovy, we would love to interact. Just think wild thoughts. That is the trying to use this consciousness, this spirituality to send a message out there, and chances are 50-50 that it's getting received. I've had many, or several experiments at least, where it worked, or sort of worked. Got some really interesting indications. Nothing that I can prove, but okay. It won't go the way you expect. You know, don't be the idiot that I was with the camcorder hidden in the sleeping bag. Ooh, was I ever tricky. So don't expect a sighting. You should be so lucky. But if you're trying for a sighting, I would say you're asking for a lot. We took a psychic out to the woods once, Bob Faust, and he did the juju, and Guy Edwards and I were sitting there firing questions at him. And the first question was, how many of there are you out there? We're in the Roaring River up above the Clackamas, and the answer was, well, just two of us, me and my son. And then the next question, Bob asked him, where's Dad? Where's your husband, he asked. And the answer came back, he's not here, the Star People took him. Oh, is he coming back? Don't know. Let's see. Well, okay, can we see you? Answer, it's a rule. I've never been seen by you people, and I'm not going to start now. So, beyond the rule of don't be seen, I believe there's also a rule, don't get photographed. And over again, you just get every indication these beings are camera shy. Now, like I said, if you want to try cameras, I would love to hear how you do. I am not saying don't try it, I'm just saying that's not my bailiwick anymore. But by all means, you know, don't let me shoot your ideas down. You do your way, I'll do my way, we'll trade notes. But whatever happens probably won't go the same way a second time, especially if you bring friends. Watch this. You wish. Or it's not going to be too verifiable, it's going to be something very vague. It's just the way they work. In my opinion, you're free to disagree. And as Alyssa would say, it's very personal. It is for your benefit, but it is not for the world. I think what we find is that, well, first of all, everybody's going to call you crazy, so you're probably better off not saying what happened. That was a nice camp out. Had some weird stuff. Don't expect, you know, everybody, wow, you know, it never goes that way. But anyway, so back to the beginning, back to the title. It seems like it's more than the Sasquatch. There are these other beings, Loch Ness monsters and so on. I do think that these things do exist in our realm, at least some of the time. I think that the Saskies might be the most conspicuous members of this menagerie that Colin Wilson talks about. But in some form, we're the animals in the zoo. They're not. We're being observed from afar, and you know, they're keeping out of sight. Maybe until we become more sophisticated, I don't know. The Sasquatches probably do some heavy lifting around this planet. One person who claimed psychic contact said they were told these things. He said, "Look, why are you guys here? What's your job?" And they go, "Who do you think built all these megalithic structures all over the place, Stonehenge, etc." There are many who say, no, that's what the Sasquatch are for, and they're being directed by more powerful entities than them. Observe, so there they are. They report to somebody more powerful, and they're all staying out of sight. And it may be that sightings are accidental, at least some of the time. I do think the Patterson-Gimlin footage was largely a screw-up. And I do suppose that maybe they had a meeting afterwards, and they turn to Patty and they go, "You idiot!" And she's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't know they could do that." And it never happened again, at least not at that site. But I think for the most part, these things, these contacts can be deliberate and directed if you're deemed as worthy. So here are some other possibilities. The Earth is making these things happen. The Earth is alive. That's the Gaia hypothesis. But then the other possibility, which I think is somehow even stronger, or at least more imaginable by me, is that intelligent beings reside within the Earth who manifest themselves sometimes, and they can move through realms. So there is a certain ghost-like aspect to their behavior. Anyway, so what I'm doing here is basically what the upshot of Edges of Science is. I'm saying that these kinds of things manifest in other realms as well. The crop circle people are always talking about electronic failures. The UFO people have missing time. I know people who've done the Sasquatch thing, and they say, I don't know what happened. We were sitting around the fire at midnight, and then next thing I know it was 5 in the morning. That's some missing time. The infrasound, not to be confused with this vibrating of the floor. Have you felt the infrasound in here? I think that's the refrigeration. I don't know. But and this happens to the UFO abductees almost every single time. Reporting telepathic contact. So you get a lot of overlap in these areas. And then there's the orbs and aerial phenomenon, which often do. Oh, shoot, you feel that infrasound right there? That is how it goes when you experience it. But I think that's machinery. What is that, Cliff?
It's not me. I don't know.
Did you feel the floor vibrating?
It's the pizza coming. I have no idea.
Anyway, so we've gone full circle. That is sort of my take on Sasquatch as it pertains to a much broader realm of beings. And that's what Colin Wilson and Ted Holliday call the Goblin Universe. So anyway, just to summarize, it says, no person understands a deep book until she has seen and lived at least part of its contents. So in other words, I would not blame anybody in this room for being skeptical about some of this radical shit I'm throwing down. But when you go out and then experience some of it, then I think it's a lot easier to suppose. But then the other thing that I would recommend is definitely read books on some of these other ancillary topics that fall into this broad realm that we call the paranormal. Crop circles, fascinating. I could go on for hours on that one. Definite aliens. It's not guys stamping down boards. No way. But you know, a very long subject, very interesting. And the crop circle people report electronic failures, missing time, heebie-jeebies, just a lot of things. And I'm going, oh my God, that's what Ron Moorhead used to say, if you haven't had camera failures, you haven't been Sasquatching very long. It's a very common thing if you are, using your electronics out there. And that's why I say, I don't disdain the use of electronics. As I like to say to people, definitely bring your therm. Bring everything. And when it stops working, please let me know. Because then I will know that we are in business. So anyway, that's my take on it. Questions. First of all, the answer to every question is, I have no idea. But anyway, go ahead.
So this is sort of a two-part thing. There's a group a couple of years ago got one night at Regal Theaters, I think it's Creation Ministries. They think this whole UFO thing and stuff like that is demonic. They're a big Christian group. So, and you one time had said, if you ever saw a portal, I think this is at Home Valley for that, you had said that don't go into it.
Right.
Is that you?
I definitely agree with that. There are people who saw this glowing, like, mercury, quicksilver curtain, and it's like, do not mess with that.
So as a part of that, I was in that Matthew Johnson group, which I got out on my own accord because he sort of turned me off. But anyway, he basically called me a dummy once because I was conversing about portals. And he said, hey, dummy, just open your eyes. But I don't know, has anybody here in this room ever seen a portal in the woods?
I gathered information on a guy several people who had seen them, and it's in Edges of Science, and it's it's down the road.
Yeah, and stuff like that. So,
where
I'd be real interested in the portal.
Yeah. Well, again, it's one of these spots of the fawn kind of places. There's something about these ley lines around the Earth. They intersect. There's magnetic energy, and the Earth is basically this dynamo. And guys like Tesla were trying to tap into this energy, but they weren't able to get there due to, various funding and all this.
Do you think portals are in one location, or do you think they?
I think it's the spots of the farm business. In other words, it's a place where the energy of the earth manifests unevenly and dramatically.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, go ahead.
Have you read the Mystery on Goat Mountain?
Well, there's a Goat Mountain outside of Colton. Right. That one, is it?
Yes.
Oh, I lived the mystery of Goat Mountain. We used to go up there all the
It's a
time.
fictional book written by a local guy who had experiences up there. I have a copy if you'd like to borrow it.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of our haunts for a long time.
Oh, and by the way, whatever it's worth, there was a sighting on February 20th on Green Mountain, right next to Goat Mountain, this 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago.
One of the stories that had there was an interaction. This fellow was self-sufficient. He lived up there in the cabin, no electricity. That he woke up to the sounds of mountain lions. So he grabbed his rifle, and there was a cave that had a family Sasquatch. So he ran up there, and he claims that these 2 or 3 mountain lions were attacking this adult Sasquatch. I was just curious, have you heard of those happening?
Let's see, what was the one I heard lately? It was a number of years ago, but they were pushing through the Alcan Highway. They were in the Yukon. The guy out in the lead was marking trees for removal. He heard this terrible screaming. He went to investigate, and he saw what appeared to be a juvenile Sasquatch stuck in this peat bog up to his waist, and was trapped in there and was screaming. He puts down his tools, goes and machetes off a bunch of branches and lays them all out and puts them out to it, and then is able to help the thing get prone and then crawl out on the branches. And that's when he looks at his watch, he's like, I gotta get to work. These guys are gonna be wondering when I'm gonna be in big trouble. So he goes back to work, doesn't say anything to his co-workers. And well, actually he sat down, he tried to say, God, the weirdest thing happened to me. I saw this hairy, and they're like, shut up, buddy, So they all went to bed, and when he got up in the morning, there was this large bouquet of wildflowers in front of his tent. And all of his co-workers like, we saw these things in a bog on the other side of the mountain. How did they get here? And he said, I tried to tell you yesterday. But in other words, so they know where you are. They know your connection to other things that happen. So I think it implies that when you go camping, one thing's for sure, if they're around, they know you're there. Then it's just a question of, do they choose to acknowledge? But they're certainly not going to do it in a particularly overt way. We do think the young ones are a little bit more naive, and so they have to learn all the shamanic tricks. And in the meantime, they're very vulnerable. And it may be that the habituation situations, like Alan and April's, they said the main thing we see is the young one, and it's alone. And so we think that they need places to leave the young ones while they go off and do their Sasquatch business, and they just need to have safe haven where it's not going to end up in the crosshairs of somebody's rifle. So that's maybe what's going on with these habituation or long-term witness situations. More speculating. Yes?
I have kind of a personal question. I don't want to open up old wounds or anything, but is it true that you got kicked out of the BFRO?
I sure did.
And why?
I got kicked out for the unforgivable sin of publishing the locals.
No.
Now, I'm sure that Matt, not being a big reader, I sent him a manuscript of it. But he didn't read, but see, he was very worried that everybody was going to do a tell-all book on his contrary ways. And so without reading the book, he was certain that that it was just an expose on what a Trumpian character he was at heart. And I said, Matt, nothing could be further from the... Well, anyway, I was unplugged that day. But I didn't care at that point. At that point, I was more or less done with the BFRO as far as what they could do for me. All the sightings start to look the same after a while. Once you get the patterns, you get it. And so I obviously didn't daylight my project until I knew exactly what was going to happen. Sure. Now, years later, Matt was at my house filming an episode of Finding Bigfoot, and he stayed the night and hung out. We smoked a joint, and I said,
Should probably
so,
edit that part out, by the way.
And so I said, by the way, did you ever read the locals? And he said, that book sold more trips on my, outings that he was doing back then before he started doing the show. So he did begrudgingly acknowledge that he sort of went off half-cocked, but I completely expected it. And after a few years in the BFRO, you kind of get it. You know, everybody's like, oh, but they have this really cool database. Been there, done that. You know, the patterns are there. They're the same patterns as they were back in 2005. And so, I don't know, more information doesn't necessarily help. After a while, you just got to get out there and do it yourself. And I got a lot of contacts, and I met great people like Cliff, and that's all I need. So.
It was in the locals, you said, the highway between Bend and LaPine.
That's right, Highway 97.
Yes.
For seeing Bigfoot run across the road. Now, 19 Bigfoot running across the road doesn't teach you that much. I would rather see something that is a little more telling. A Bigfoot in a tree is a lot more, it gives us a lot more information, but I saw Bigfoot run across the road. I couldn't care less about those because they just don't teach us anything. I'm sure they happen, and they may be random, but I think for the most part, they are actually performing. That it's not as random as we might think.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you might be wondering, what the hell does Cliff have? Like, why is Cliff having Thom speak, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking that, and Thom would even think that if he didn't know me so well. But the whole point is here, yeah, Dr. Johnson, who I don't have any problem with whatsoever, he would definitely call me an aper. I personally think Sasquatches are some sort of relative hominin. I think that they're probably Australopithecines, specifically parentheses. I'm totally biological. Thom perhaps isn't as biological as I am. Right?
I started out there.
You might have got that from this presentation. But what the hell is Cliff doing? Here's one of the things. I don't have to agree with people I like. In fact, I would recommend all Bigfooters hanging out with people who are diametrically opposed to what your belief system is, because you should always be challenging your own belief system.
And it gives you a lot more to talk about around the campfire.
And Thom said it 3 or 4 times tonight. He says, like, I got my way, you got yours, I'm not discouraging you, go out and do it. There is someone, believe it or not, on YouTube right now advocating violence against me because I disagree with him. He says people like me and Mel Dumb should be pushed down to the ground and punched in the face. I have not watched one of these videos, but like 5 or 6 of my friends are saying, Cliff, you are in danger. There's a person advocating violence against you because you disagree. So I think that this right now is probably a model for the rest of our Bigfooting friends out there. You do not have to disagree. You don't have to agree with somebody to get along with them. In fact, I would advocate all of us to hang out with people who disagree with you because it challenges your belief. Okay? Don't let these, frankly, probably mentally ill people affect you. It is okay to disagree with people. It is okay to hear challenging positions to your own. Nobody's got this.
I've been called mentally ill.
Yeah. I didn't think you heard what I said there.
I've been called worse.
But you hear what I'm saying. You hear the song I'm singing. Spread kindness, spread love. We love Bigfoot. Let it be known that the love is at the source of this, not the violence, not the hate, not the insecurity of being disagreed with. Welcome, Thom. Thank you so much for coming to the show. I don't care what he thinks. I love to hear him speak. It's so much fun to hear your ideas, Thom. Thank you so much.
And by all means, give me feedback if you find things, you get something weird, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for so long.